Okay. So, we are beginning, I think this is number 7 on the Kuzari. We are, Baruch Hashem, going through, trying to have a better understanding of a systematic view of the Torah. That is, what does the Torah teach us? And what is Judaism all about? We started talking about yesterday, or we ended yesterday with nature. That there are those who deify or reify, make nature into a god, give it powers, such as wisdom, such as caring, those type of things. And it's a real problem. It's a real problem. Because it says, the king says in the Kuzari, that I see that the Chachamim, the sages of the Greeks, the various philosophers, use words describing nature as nature has wisdom, nature acts, and sometimes even nature creates. You don't have to be quiet, it's just recorded. And that people are going to wonder, who is this blowing his nose throughout the shiur? By the way, you're going to get a dishonorable mention, Shmuel. The whole point of basketball is the ball needs to go into the basket. I was watching it and I'm like, either he doesn't understand how this works, or...
That was a reverse layup, Rabbi.
I saw even non-reverse layups that were missed. I think a few shots that were air balls. So, I don't know, my friend.
I'm trying to be like Mike.
Yeah, you're more like Ike.
Rabbi, can we see your skills on the court?
Well, yeah, I have a mean hook shot. That was...
No, you're guarding Rabbi for those.
When I was in high, we used to play basketball, and that was when Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was... And so Magic also, I was in L.A. I grew up in L.A., and so even Magic had a good hook shot. And, you know, I was sort of like a forward and get and then hook shot. And it was pretty good. I still use it on my kids when we play basketball. Now, why'd you get that? But I don't really play with them anymore. I got other things to do. I prefer going on a run than to play basketball. And they want to play basketball, they don't want to run. So we so that when I'm done running, they're like, okay, come play with us. Like, I already ran 5K, I'm done. I'm not running further more. And so that's the battle. What are you smiling about? Saxton back, man. Wow.
Sorriest clap. Oh, we got a name.
That's the sorriest clap. That's pretty true. That's pretty good. Tov. So the rabbi says, yes. The philosophers confusingly led us to use language that is imperfect, because we are ascribing nature qualities that we usually use to describe God. We say that God is all-knowing, or God is wise. We say that God creates. Say God is all-powerful. Whereas they apply those concepts, those terms, to nature. So the rabbi says, yes, exactly. This is where the confusion comes from. And then he says, the sun, the moon, and the stars, all of them have certain, let's call them functions for the lack of a better term. They have certain natures. There are other entities in the world that have certain, let's call it behavior, like a rock. What does a rock do best? You ever seen a rock? What does it do? It doesn't move, right? It sort of sits there. If you throw a rock up in the air, what happens? It falls right back down. Fire If you light a fire, what is the first thing that the flame does? Shoots up. Water. What happens to water when you pour it? It starts to flow, goes, right? So there seems to be a small letter N, calling nature, to various bodies in reality. Right? There's natures. For example, the moon has a particular orbit. The sun has its own sort of functions. It produces heat and light, right? Sunlight. Rays, as we call it. And it has radioactive rays, and you have all sorts of... I don't want to get into astronomy and astrophysics at this stage. It's a little too early in the day. It's only 3 o'clock. But the point is that we see what we would call activities in the natural world of, we would say, inanimate objects. Okay? Certain elements behave in a certain way that are predictable. Imagine if rocks started floating. That would be a real problem for us. Right? I mean, now, we have a concept of gravity. So we don't ascribe a rock a nature that its nature is to go and to stay at one spot. We ascribe this concept of gravity, right? But in Aristotelian physics, since they didn't have a concept of gravity, they said that the entire universe, the physical earth, is made up of 4 elements that interact in certain proportions. And those elements is water, fire, air, and earth. And those 4, when they're interacting with one another in a certain percentage, let's say, 30% air, 10% water, 80%, 50% earth, and then, another 10%, I don't know if that ends up to 100. I was just giving an example of percentages. But the idea is that that's the makeup of the entire physical world, right? The earth. The Aristotelian model claims that the super earth, and anything outside of earth, right? Sublunar and then supralunar world, those worlds are made out of something called ether, which is called the 5th element. If you've ever heard of the concept of 5th element, it's called ether. All of these elements have natures embedded in them. And it's not so foreign to us. I'm going to get a little bit into this maybe later on how we understand Aristotelian physics with, let's say, contemporary genetic theory. That is, if we look at them together, how would it work? And it actually does work. It's a little different, but it could work in the way that we understand DNA and in what's happening in a cell in terms of genetics, and how Aristotle looked at it as a concept of a form. So that's going to help us understand what's going on. So the rabbi says, all these things that are functioning in nature, we can say that there's functions. We could say that the earth has the tendency of laying flat and not moving, and water has a tendency to flow, and that you have air that is flowing, above, going up and you can describe all these things as functions, right? Peulot. But it's not permissible to describe this as a wisdom, chokhmah. It's not that these objects, that these entities in our universe have chokhmas, they operate through intelligence. Okay, could we please turn on the air conditioning? Because we don't want to turn this into a schwitzer. There we go. Thank you. But there's certain things we cannot ascribe to physical entities. For example, emanation of form. Now for us, we're not thinking in the concept of form and matter. But in the world of both Plato and Aristotle, and that was the scientific worldview from at least Plato and Aristotle, although there's some differences between them, we don't need to get into that. It's not the intro to Greek philosophy. But from that period, right, so it's about, we're talking about 400 BCE, okay, 4th century BCE, all the way till probably we're talking about Renaissance, which is, 1500s. We essentially have a singular model of science. Now there might be changes and differences about this, that, or the other of the commentators of Aristotle and the writings of, let's say, Al-Farabi and Ibn Sina and the most important philosopher in the 12th century called Ibn Rushd. So those Arab philosophers or Muslim philosophers, most of them were not Arab. They were, Al-Farabi was Turkish, Ibn Sina was Persian, and Ibn Rushd was an Arab from Spain. Actually lived in the same city that the Rambam was born, in Cordoba. And when I was in Cordoba, the tour guide told me, along with everybody else, that the Rambam studied under Ibn Rushd. And I looked at him and I said, what are you talking about? Where did you get this from? The Rambam writes that when he's now, towards writing the Moireh Nevuchim, he's writing it in Cairo, okay? In the late 1170s, 1180s, right? Around that period, that he's starting to write, he passed away 1204. He wrote it towards the end of his life. He says he hasn't had time to learn the writings of Ibn Rushd. I don't have time for this. So you want to say that he was a student when he was a kid? What Jewish family back in Spain would send their kid to learn with a Qadi? Do you know what a Qadi is? Qadi, Lahavdil Elef Avdallah, is a dayan in Islamic law. He is a judge, Qadi. Okay? There are certain positions according to Islamic jurisprudence. Qadis are judges, and then we have muftis. Muftis are what Lahavdil are Poisek, that they write fatwas. Right? The mufti writes a fatwa, which are Sharia decisions on what you can do and can't do. But a Qadi is sitting as a judge, and cases come to him, and he makes a decision. And Ibn Rushd was a Qadi. I don't think he was in Cordoba. I think he went somewhere else to be a Qadi, but he lived there. Yes?
So didn't Rambam study other non-Jewish sources, though?
I'm sure all Jews who lived in Spain or in the Muslim world were conversant of Islam.
Like
Shakespeare didn't exist at the time of the Rambam. Thank you. Not even close. All right? Let's pan the camera so that Shidduchim are finished for him. Shakespeare. Where did you get that
I'm
from?
from Texas. You can't expect that much, man.
I don't know.
You gotta expect a lot of it.
I don't know. When I speak to students from University of Texas at Austin, they know when Shakespeare was. I think maybe it's a chimney thing. All right, back to this. So, according to this worldview, their science, everything is made up, which everything is called a substance in Aristotelian terminology. Substance is made up of two things necessarily: matter and form. Matter and form. Matter is this blob of those four elements mixed, but without the form in it, it's just a blob. Okay? The blob that you want to have a tree has to have a form of the tree for the tree to be a tree. You need the form of a human being to be a human being. If you don't have that form, it won't work. Okay? So, it gets a little more complicated. Why? Because when you have an acorn, right? So an acorn has the form of an acorn. It has the matter of the acorn. That's what it has actually. But potentially, what does it really have? The form of a tree. What kind of tree? Oak tree. Acorn tree. So if you have a seed, right, of an apple, it has the form of an apple seed. It has the material of being a seed, a matter of a seed, apple. When you plant it, now it's going through various processes and it must change forms. As its matter metastasizes or changes from a seed to now to a little plant, so it must get the form of the plant, and then it into a yearling, and then it gets into actually a tree, and then a bigger, right? So the form, now, where does this form come from? According to the model that they use, the form comes from without. It's coming from the divine realm. It is something that is coming from God. There is a process by which the physical world is going through a process of change, and that change is being caused by the movements of the celestial bodies, okay? Heating, warmth, moisture. There is sort of like, they are found in, kind of like in a pot, and the pot is being stirred, and all that affects changes in the matter. And when the matter is ripe to receive a form, it receives that form.
So the form is coming from a spiritual.
The form is coming, and that's what he's saying. He says, you could say that the material is going through changes such as what? Heat, cooling, moisture, and drying, things like that. That you can describe matter. But to say that the bringing the form down and also setting limitations of how tall, right? Or giving color or nature, all actions that imply wisdom, chokhmah, and intentionality, you cannot ascribe it to anything but God. Because God is ultimate, wise, powerful, and has control of this world. Okay? So God is the one that is emanating or sending these forms. Now there's a little bit of a more complicated mahalach of what's happening and how this form comes down. There are two models of explaining this. The easiest, the way that I do it, is that matter is like a radio, okay? And that this radio, you keep moving the dial to find the right station, and when you hit that station, all of a sudden you start hearing. Why? Because the transmission that is coming, that matter is able to grasp it. And then it begins to become that, have that form. Okay? Our model today, at least in contemporary genetic theory, is a model that form, although we don't use that term, is found in the DNA. That the seed has a DNA that is the potential for this seed to become an apple tree is already within it. And when the matter is prepared to click the DNA to now kick it up a notch, to switch from a seed to a seedling, right? That process is, there's something that's happening to the seed, right? To an extent, it looks like the seed is rotting, right? And then it sort of opens up and then it starts having roots and a little, you ever grew up beans? right? In a dish, as a project, you put some cotton and water, and you put or like avocados, right? What's happening? Some process is causing the avocado to start sending roots. Photosynthesis. That's how plants get nourishment. That's not what they... So, when you take, for example, a zygote, right, a fertilized human egg, it's called a zygote. So it has the form of the zygote. But something has to tell those DNA to start, the cells to start multiplying, and to these cells to become, we're running really fast. These cells become liver cells, these cells become heart cells, right? There's some sort of a process that's occurring to create this. We cannot look. This is what he said. He says that there seems to be, if you call anything of that prepare matter, you want to call that nature, you haven't done anything wrong. There's nothing wrong with that. But don't relate chokhmah or wisdom to it. Just like we do not say that a man and a woman are the ones that create a baby through their intimacy. Right? What they're only doing is preparing the material aspect. But the form, what makes the baby a baby, what makes a human being, that's not what we do. That is something that is coming from God. The form comes from the divine form giver. And it is God that is sending the forms to this world. How does he do it? There's a process you can read in Hilchot Yesodei Torah of the Rambam. He talks about this process. There's other Sfarim that talk about this in detail. But the idea is that there is an intelligence called the agent or active intellect. The Kuzari dealt with it. If you listen to a few shiurim ago, we discussed this. That emanates, transmits the forms. And once matter is ready, then the form clicks it.
Did they believe that the distribution of the four elements was nature or spiritual?
The distribution is just part of the world. Right? A chimpanzee can't create an alligator. That's not the material that it has. That form of an alligator will never click on that matter. So, but the mixture of matter, if you want to say that, talk about nature in that sense, as long as you don't ascribe wisdom and intentionality, you're okay, says the rabbi. But once you start saying nature, it's an infinite wisdom, has a balance in the ecosystem between the turtles and the sharks and the plastic that's floating. That would be, we're out. We're done. We're not playing the game. Okay. So he says, it should not be very far from your eyes that there are examples of divine action in this lower world. Because when matter is prepared to receive a form, that is a divine act. Putting that form. And the form is spiritual. It doesn't have a physical existence, except it manifests itself in matter, which is a substance. Okay? And he says this whole process of understanding how nature works is both the root of emunah, of faithfulness in God, and also the root of disbelief. This is where the problem lies. That is, you could look at the natural world, and either the natural world will bring you closer to God, or looking at the natural world, it'll take you farther from God. It's right here in this spot. Very intelligent people are religious, scientists, and there are very intelligent people, scientists, who are not religious. And it's not because the evidence proves one way or the other. The Rabbi Yehuda Halevi is already telling you in the 12th century, the evidence that you have can lead you into two opposing views. You could either look at it and see the hand of Hashem, you could see God, or you recognize nature and you don't see God. And this is where we are. This is the world we're living. Okay? Okay. So the king is puzzled by this last statement of the rabbi. He says, how can one and the same idea could be both the root, the principle of faith, or the root or principle of disbelief? How could that be? So the rabbi says, yes, it is. Indeed it is. Because the things, the matters that are prepared to receive the forms from God are not under the purview of human beings. A person cannot estimate and imagine the quantity and quality, and also the essence, and how time and place and the combinations of all these elements and how they are put together. These are very, very complicated processes. So he's talking about 12th century concepts. We can use our concepts. The entire existence in the universe is essentially a bunch of proteins. I could give you some material to read if you're interested in this concept. From all these proteins, you either get a fish or you get Moshe. You get all life are essentially proteins. How did this work? How did they come to be? How many elements are there? The element chart in chemistry. The entire universe, the entire Earth is made up of these elements. 64. I saw since I was in high school. They had a different. I think there were more of them. Like, wait, I don't remember. I remember I had to memorize this in chemistry, but now they have all these other ones. So, but whatever it is, whatever the number is, now people are going to, how can the rabbi not know how many elements? I know there's 2,711 dafs in the Gemara in Bavli, okay, and 4,192 Mishnayos. That's what I think it's important. But a person should know of the physical world, should know how this world works. But says the Kuzari, look, there are certain mysteries of how the physical world works, and it's beyond our capability. It is certainly possible that we're moving where the boundary of knowledge is, so that when we didn't know, let's say we didn't know 95%, and let's say now we know 30%, maybe 20%. I don't know, I don't want to put a number. So yeah, we are able to move that envelope further and further a little bit. But as we move it, sometimes then all of a sudden, the other part, it's like pulling a tablecloth, right? You pull it in one way, then all of a sudden, you've got that side of the table uncovered. So sometimes we find out things and we go, oh, what we thought, that doesn't work. And so says the Kuzari, there's certain things only God can account for everything, for the entire system. And it's not within our purview. And so, this knowledge can only come directly from God. And whoever understands this idea that this whole universe, the way that it's arranged, the way that it functions, in terms of quality and quantity and all of life and existence, he says it's from whoever understands that it's all from God, is Mekayim, is fulfilling a mitzvah of God with all its details, and he becomes a believer. That is believing that God runs the universe and he is the creator and he's the one that puts cute little panda bears, right? And skunks and all these wonderful animals and all the wonderful scenery and all the wonderful... I met a woman that was doing her PhD on studying ants, the social structures of ants. It was fascinating. She was explaining to me how ants run their colonies and unbelievable stuff. Just ants. They're little robots. They're not thinking like us. They're just... Yes. I was going to quote Shakespeare, but I didn't want to mess him up. There's a line in Othello.
Shakespeare.
Why?
Sounds cool.
Sounds cool. Okay. That is not the question. No, I think in a line in Othello, there are more mysteries in the heavens than in the books of you philosophers. Horatio. I think that's the line. It's been years since I've seen it. The reason I know that line, because there was a line in the Kuzari that was saying the exact same point. And I said, how is that? Did Shakespeare read the Kuzari? Because he took it right out of here. I couldn't prove it. That was like a graduate paper that I wrote. And I couldn't, but I just noticed that it was very similar. So, yes, sir.
What year was the Kuzari writing his?
I don't remember. I mentioned it in the first shir. I have it written in my office. So if you follow me after class, after mincha, I will tell you because I looked that up. Let's see. I thought that in this introduction he does say something. If there's a...
You said something around the cruise words like 1072.
Something like that. I think that sounded right. I didn't want to make it up.
Like around Rambam again?
No. He's earlier than the Rambam. The Rambam was born in 1137 or 1135. There's a big machlokes where 35 or 37. So let's say 1135. So you figure the Rambam wrote his first book when he was 18 or so. Okay? Which is Milot HaHigayon. It's a book on logic. Then he wrote his commentary on the Mishnah. So he started from 20, and then when he was 30, he started working on the Mishnah Torah. And that was a 10-year project. Okay, so 10 years to work on the Mishnah Torah sounds like, wow. But if you think about it, okay, 10 years is how many days? 3650, right? You don't have to take your socks off, start counting, right? 3650, just add a zero. People are flashback, Rabbi, don't do it. And there are about 1,000 prakim in the Mishnah Torah. And if you look at it, then it's about every 3 days the Rambam finished one parak. And in one parak, there are sugyas all over Shas. And I'm not taking off Shabbos and Yom Tov that he didn't work. And he kept 2 days because he was living in Egypt. So imagine how much you would have to take off. So every 3 days, there's one parak ready to go. It's at an enormous pace. Enormous, very, very fast. And once he finished the Mishnah Torah, then he has other works that he's writing. And then towards the end of his life, he wrote the Moreh Nevuchim. So that's the... And he has letters that he writes to the Chachmei Lunel and to other people. Yes?
Did he know about Rashi, or Rashi know about him? Did their time periods correlate?
I think I haven't seen that he quotes Rashi, but I can't imagine that he didn't. Rashi's earlier. No. No. Tov. So let's continue. So if you're trying to understand how matter is prepared to receive the forms from above, just using human intellect, okay? Just you're doing the best you can, you're sitting there with a microscope, trying to figure out how does this blob become whatever it becomes. Using logical arguments and reason, or if you follow the works of the astrologers, through trying to use forces that exist in nature. That type of person is called a kofer. It's somebody that's rejecting God. This person is sacrifices and offering incense according to his thoughts without really understanding what he's doing. And he doesn't understand why you need to do certain things. Why do you do this as opposed to that? Why do you do these amounts? Why do you have to do it this way? Why do you have to do it in that way? Why do you have to do this now? Why does Kriyat Shema have to be now? Why can't it be later? Why can't I sleep till 11:30 and then daven Shachris? Why can't yeshiva just start later in the day and end at 3 a.m. when the clubs close? What?
Would be great.
That would be great. Yeah, I don't know about that. And he says all these different things he would know. And he gives a parable. It's a wonderful parable that I think sends the message of how important the Torah prophecy is, that is necessary to understand this world. He says it's similar, a person who's trying to figure out this world by himself is like a person who breaks into the medicine cab, the pharmacy of a physician or a pharmacist that is an expert in giving medications to different people. And when the physician and the pharmacist are not there, and he sees a lot of people coming to the pharmacy, he starts dispensing medicine. He just starts giving them stuff. Now, he doesn't know who needs what. He just thinks, oh, you need this white pill. Here you go. What is this pill? I don't know. Take 4 of these. And so a lot of people are coming because they want medicine. He doesn't know who's supposed to get what, how much, when to take, when not to take. And he starts just giving them out. Okay? So what is he doing? Some of these people are, what's going to happen to them? They're going to die. Right? Some people, nothing's going to help them. And some people, he might actually hit it on the nail on the head and cure them. Certainly possible, right? If he has 1,000 pills to pass out, and 1,000, I mean, is it possible that he would get some percentage right? And so, once they realize that all of this becomes a mess, this is where people try to make shortcuts, figure out for themselves. Okay? We'll stop here and we'll continue Be'ezah Hashem tomorrow with the next Kuzari Shir.